Hey there, my name is Anthony Romano, and I'm going to tell you in this video very quickly some key components of meal timing. And yes, I did just adjust my lamp. This lamp is very key, and it helps me with a lot of my videos. But meal timing. There's a lot of different variables depending on what kind of diet you're doing. But if you're doing any sort of intermittent fasting or any sort of fat loss diet, there's many very impactful benefits you can receive if you just tweak things ever so slightly with meal timing. And I'll explain that after I roll my intro. So, I'm going to start off this video by saying that when we're talking about meal timing, obviously this opens the doors to intermittent fasting or prolonged fasting, but we're talking the context of one day here. And obviously the longer you fast, the closer you get to autophagy. Now, autophagy is this sort of cellular cleansing that goes on that gives you these longevity benefits and these essentially antioxidizing effects, because essentially the weaker cells in your body are being fed to these stronger cells, and it's this self-eating is actually what it translates to in Greek, funny enough. So there are these longevity benefits in the health side of things, but this video is aimed at fat loss, and this video is aimed at people getting a grasp on their lifestyle, especially when it comes to maintaining a lean physique in that lifestyle. And meal timing is very key. So the first big thing I'll tell you is that there are certain foods that can elicit certain hormonal responses. And carbohydrates and protein are the most likely of the macronutrients to create an insulin spike. Carbohydrates are far more likely to create an insulin spike, and proteins generally will have a slow and moderate insulin. Fat has a very, very negligible insulin response, and overall, carbs are the primary insulin spiker. Part of insulin's purpose is to reduce blood sugar. So one big insulin spike in the morning is sending a signal to your body to shut off fat burning. Okay, so that's one huge tip right off the bat, is that an insulin spike in the morning will dictate the entire metabolic status of your entire day. So overall, if you're trying to lose fat or you're doing some sort of fat loss pursuit, no matter what kind of macro scheme you adhere to or what kind of diet you adhere to, an insulin spike in the morning is going to dramatically halt all your progress, because insulin is an anabolic hormone and fat loss is a catabolic protocol. So essentially, any sort of goal that is catabolic is going to require things to be broken down. Catabolic is often thrown around as like this sort of muscle wasting term, but that's not what catabolic means. Catabolic simply means breaking things down to be used as fuel. And that's what fat burning is. So if you're fat burning, you want to be catabolic, just simply not catabolic to muscle tissue. And from that first premise, right, the first big tip is, an insulin spike in the morning, so a high carb meal, especially without any fats in there to diminish and blunt that insulin response, or any other fiber or any other protein to kind of still mix the macros and blunt that insulin response, is going to be essentially a mistake. And this is why intermittent fasting has gained so much popularity. Essentially, it's been one great surefire way to ensure a low insulin level in the morning, because you're not eating anything. Now, this ties into a lot of the keto stuff, if you're one of the people who watches my videos because you enjoy keto dieting. But no matter what you do, even if you're eating carbs in your diet, I would advise you, if you're doing some sort of fat loss pursuit, to push that meal later into the day. This is also how fat fasting has become a more popular technique, and I've been making some videos on it, because essentially fat fasting is consuming fat, and you can still use some protein in there as well, which will break the fasted state, so those autophagy benefits I was talking about, but it will still preserve a low insulin state, at least for the next few hours. So as far as fat loss is concerned, insulin management in the morning is key. And this ties in with another concept which I speak about recently, which is cortisol in the morning. Now, cortisol is much higher in the morning and much lower in the evening. And this is because cortisol is the stress hormone. Another myth surrounding another hormone is that with cortisol, people think it's all bad. And it obviously has some, bad side effects in excess, just like anything else. Excuse me. But much like insulin, there's a huge misconception here. People think that, I don't want to have any insulin, it's bad. No, it's perfectly necessary when you're trying to build muscle and in moderate amounts at the right time. And the exact same thing applies for cortisol. Cortisol is meant to be released at certain times because it gets you to focus and get shit done. That's what cortisol is for. It's meant to be the stress hormone. And there's good kinds of stress and bad kinds of stress. So in the morning, cortisol naturally spikes, and if you are maintaining that low insulin state, cortisol will not attack your muscle, basically your muscle fibers. Attack is the wrong word essentially, but it will not target your muscle fibers because cortisol generally only breaks down muscle tissue in the presence of insulin. And like I said, insulin is an anabolic hormone. So basically, you're only going to risk breaking down muscle tissue if you're giving your body mixed messages, right? Anabolic and catabolic at the same time. So it makes sense logically. But when we're talking about managing this cortisol, you want to take advantage of that cortisol spike in the morning. You want to take advantage of cortisol spiking and time your lower insulin levels of the day, because you can go very low if you want. So you can do the ketogenic diet and achieve very low insulin levels, which you can of course still break out of when you're trying to do a keto bulk or any sort of muscle building protocol. But in general, that's why keto is so efficient for fat loss. At least that's one of the reasons why, is that it preserves a low insulin state. So you can really go aggressive and pursue that if you like. But if you can do anything in your power to lower your insulin level relative to what it normally is, and then combine that at the timing of when your cortisol is the most peaked, then you're set. So, you're certainly off to a great start in such a scenario. So in the daytime, this is exactly why intermittent fasting has gained so much popularity, because people find that it works, people find that their appetite is much more sustained, and this is partially because they're timing this low insulin level at the time of day where their cortisol is the most high, and this activates, sympathetic nervous system, other, mentally arousing states of mind. And then in the evening time, you have this sort of scenario where you have lower levels of cortisol, you're more likely to get ready to go to sleep, and you are less insulin sensitive. So I wanted to lead into the insulin stuff in the beginning, because if I had led with the part that I'm about to go into right now, it may have been confusing. But in the daytime, you're actually more insulin sensitive. And this makes sense because, as I mentioned, in the morning, insulin is low. Think about it. You just slept for presumably 8 hours. I mean, not all of us do that, but most people sleep 8 or so hours, or at least 6 to 8 hours, or whatever, however many hours you slept. You haven't been eating during that period unless you have a very severe, sleepwalking condition. So your blood sugar and blood insulin is going to be the most stable of any part of the entire day, because for most people, that's a very long time period of the day to go without eating. So your blood sugar and blood insulin is going to stabilize. And then you're going to wake up in the lowest insulin state out of the entire day. So naturally, you are the most sensitive to insulin because you haven't had an insulin rise within the last 8 or so hours. For most people, longer than that, because I don't know too many people who eat the very second before they go into bed. So the point is, you haven't ate recently before bed, and then you sleep, and then you wake up, and you're the most insulin sensitive. Now, this means multiple things. This is the other side of the coin with the fact that you are most primed for fat burning in the morning because your insulin level is lowest, and you can keep it low, and you can amplify the fat burning effects by keeping it low and having that cortisol rise naturally occur in the morning. But at the same time, for anybody doing some sort of muscle building protocol, there's a two-sided coin to this. There's a double-edged sword to this, okay? You're the most insulin sensitive in the morning, which means your body is most primed to take up insulin and use it effectively in the morning. And this applies to both fat tissue and muscle tissue, because insulin sensitivity doesn't just apply to pancreatic secretion of insulin. It applies to your tissue sensitivities. And varying tissues will have different degrees of sensitivity. For example, certain people who have like love handles or something, that part of your body is more sensitive to insulin because it's more primed and ready to soak it up and store it as energy. Well, store carbohydrate as energy with the aid of insulin. So essentially, there's a double-edged sword. If you're somebody who's doing a very aggressive bulk protocol, yeah, you may want to avoid fasting in the morning. You may want to start off very aggressively, and you might not care if you add a little bit of fat, right? That may be the situation you find yourself in. But not everybody wants to do that. And personally for me, over the years, I feel like my sense of muscle building phases has matured. And I've gotten to this point where essentially I've read much more on the growth hormone benefits, the IGF-1 benefits of intermittent fasting. Essentially, when you're in an intermittent fast, your IGF-1, which is like a carrier for insulin, and your growth hormone, it's a carrier for growth hormone. And growth hormone is not necessarily anabolic, but it brings this youthfulness, essentially, if I had to describe it, to your body, okay? And there can be muscle building benefits to this. So when we're talking about building muscle in a lean manner, you may be better set by pursuing, example, an intermittent fasting protocol with your bulk. So, example, still hitting a caloric surplus and adequate training and positive nitrogen balance, right? So enough protein, enough training, and enough calories, and then doing an intermittent fasting protocol to keep this lean gains protocol, right? Lean gains is the term by Brad Pilon, who's been around for a very long time, much longer than I've been around. And Brad Pilon actually created this lean gains protocol, if I recall correct at least. So essentially, the whole point is that you kind of, by extending the fast longer, if you're somebody who does intermittent fasting, you're maximizing these IGF-1 benefits and this growth hormone benefit. And when we apply that into a muscle building context, essentially you're getting a more efficient muscle building phase. So even though you're more insulin sensitive in the morning, if you were to do something like work out fasted, then you're really amplifying the muscle building capacity of your body by upregulating these hormones and your sensitivity to insulin again, thus further. Because if you fast, like I said, as time goes on, you're going to get more insulin sensitive. But if you start eating in the day, the longer you're in this fed state, the lower your insulin sensitivity will diminish. So essentially, you're going to get more insulin resistant, if that's kind of a, improper use of the word here, because insulin resistance is sort of a very far end of the spectrum, but you will be less insulin sensitive the more meals you eat throughout the day. So on a moment by moment basis, you're more insulin sensitive in the morning, and as time goes on, if you were to fast, essentially that first meal is where you're most insulin sensitive. And this is kind of where people get things twisted. They say, oh yeah, no, at 10 p.m. you're much less insulin sensitive than you are at 10 a.m. Well, if you didn't eat the entire day, you're much more insulin sensitive at 10 p.m. So this is how things essentially will compound. There's a sort of building effect to things, because your body stresses ultra efficiency the more stress which is put on it, right? And this makes sense because evolutionarily, if you didn't eat for 2 days, your body really needs to prioritize using things effectively. So hopefully this gave you some clarity into meal timing, because whether you're on a bulk or a cut, or whether you're doing, intermittent fasting, if it fits your macros, ketogenic dieting, no matter what kind of diet you're doing, what you need to know is that there are certain hormonal processes going on. And if you're very aggressively pursuing fat loss, you should take advantage of that, low insulin state in the morning and fast, and perhaps work out fasted, because from there, you're going to boost your insulin sensitivity momentarily anytime prior to that first meal. After that first meal, you'll be more insulin sensitive, which you want even if you're cutting, because even if you're cutting and you just trained, you want your body to use this anabolic hormone properly, okay? So either way, this is just what I felt like talking about today. Okay, I felt like giving some background knowledge onto meal timing. And this is by no means exhaustive of all the different mechanisms here. It's simply giving you some more stuff to build on your knowledge base. And you can look this up, don't take my word for it, but do your own Googling or subscribe to my page and, watch my other more scientific, proof-oriented videos. Beyond this, thank you for watching this video, and I encourage you to go through the rest of my playlists on my channel, particularly the Any Diet playlist, because that playlist is the playlist that I've made, and I've thrown this video into as well, because it applies to principles which you can use no matter what diet you want. Like example, meal timing, you can time meals regardless of what that meal contains, okay? And this is why you should watch the Any Diet playlist, because you'll learn different techniques of fat loss and muscle building that apply to all diets, okay? And you can tinker with things on your own, but that's it for this one. So go to my website, hormonalketo.com, if you want coaching. Leave me a comment, by the way, on other topics you want me to talk about. And besides this, I'm very much swirling around the possibility in my head of doing group coaching. So if you're interested in group coaching, let me know, because I know that this is something I'm going to do for keto bulking. But no matter what kind of diet approach you want to do, if you're interested in group coaching in any capacity, let me know, because this makes things way easier. And I think it's probably a better way for a lot of people to get my coaching services at a much more, immediately applicable and affordable cost. So let me know. And besides that, follow my Instagram, subscribe to my page right now, and like this video. Either way, leave me a comment if you want to hear from me, and thank you again for all the support. Once again, Anthony Romano, peace.